What's up, everyone? This is Brady from Nat&Brad, and as you know, the Nintendo Switch 2 has come out a little bit over a month ago with a pretty solid lineup of games to come with it, and a lot of cool games coming out in the future, such as the end of this week, the new Donkey Kong Bonanza, which I'm sure everybody, including myself, is excited for. But what I want to talk about in this video are some of the series that we may have forgotten about, some that I would love to see make a return in the spotlight on the Nintendo Switch 2. Let's get into it. One game that I've always had a lot of fun with and would love to see make a return is Battalion Wars. The first game came out on the Nintendo GameCube in 2005, and it had a sequel for the Nintendo Wii that came out in 2007. Battalion Wars is a real-time tactical strategy game that focuses on commanding a squad of units while controlling a single soldier at a time, while experiencing a fun, interesting story with a colorful cast of characters. The story focuses on rising global tensions in a fictional world that consists of many nations: the Western Frontier, Tundran Territories, Solar Empire, Anglo Isles, and Exylvania. Each nation has their own theme, characters, and playstyles. The first Battalion Wars game on the GameCube's story mode was focused primarily from the perspective of the Western Frontier. Players were able to get to know the characters from that faction very well as you followed the story of that faction in particular. Now, you were able to play as other factions, but those missions had to be unlocked by completing challenges in certain levels. Battalion Wars was received very well by the players overall, but was criticized due to its lack of multiplayer and lack of gameplay as other factions. The sequel, however, Battalion Wars 2, addressed these criticisms and had individual missions within the main story mode for all of the other factions, including the Western Frontier. They even added naval units for more tactical variety and an online multiplayer. Me personally, I had a blast with the second game, and really wish that there was a way to tell how many hours I put into it. If I had to guess, I'd say at least 100. Much of my time on that game was spent with one of my longtime childhood friends during summer vacations, playing against each other in the online multiplayer mode. We had a blast and it never got old. One thing that I would love to see are improvements to the formula that the developers can make utilizing the much more powerful Nintendo Switch 2 hardware, whether that be in the story mode, multiplayer, or maybe some other single-player based modes. Regarding multiplayer, maybe they could add some more multiplayer modes, a ranking system, and lobbies where multiple people could play as different factions and partake in objective-based large battles. Now, wouldn't it be awesome to have 2v2 online multiplayer? Personally, I think it would be hectic in all the right ways. Some single-player features on my wish list would be a general battle mode and, perhaps a leveling system where you could unlock perks and other rewards, and possibly add a system where you have abilities for individual COs that you play as. I think that it would add a nice touch and a good bit of replay value after completing the story mode. But overall, this is definitely a game series that should return for the Nintendo Switch 2 to rekindle the love that people had back when and maybe bring in some new players. Next up, I want to talk about a game that I played a lot with my cousins growing up on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS, and that is none other than Advance Wars. These games are an absolute blast. Basically, these are turn-based, animated modern military strategy games where you control many units on a battlefield that is filled with a good variety of terrain and properties that can be captured for the betterment of the faction that you are playing as. The factions include Orange Star, Blue Moon, Yellow Comet, Green Earth, and Black Hole. The story focuses on global warfare between some of these factions, but it is a family-friendly, fun experience. Well, unless you play the most recent installment of the series on the Nintendo DS, Advance Wars Days of Ruin, which has taken the series on a much darker road and is aimed at a more mature audience compared to its predecessors. Advance Wars Days of Ruin also has its own unique story and is not tied to the original 3 games. Personally, I would much rather see a continuation of the story with the original characters over a continuation of Days of Ruin. Though I have my personal preferences, any new game would be welcomed at this point. One major appeal to these games is that you are able to choose a commanding officer before going into battle. Not only are the characters fun, but they can specialize in certain units and have their own abilities known as CO powers. It is super fun to experiment with all of these characters and the units that they specialize in, as well as how to use their abilities to try to gain that tactical edge. Another feature that these games offer is a map design mode. Personally, this is my favorite feature because it keeps the game interesting and allows the player to use their imagination to come up with their own what-if battles. It's super cool and something that I find myself spending a ton of time in. I remember growing up, me and my cousins would come up with crazy what-if battles. Usually they were really unfair. Like, one of my cousins made the Blue Moon HQ, which put you as Orange Star with, if you guessed it, minimal resources going up against an absolutely stacked Blue Moon faction. It was crazy and almost impossible to win, but that was kind of the charm of it. Just being able to do that was pretty cool. Now, after the release of Advance Wars Days of Ruin in 2008, the series have been shelved for many years until a remake of the first 2 games were announced at EA in 2021 and eventually making it to store shelves in 2023. This random revival of the series gives me hope that we will see a new title come out, hopefully in the Switch 2 generation. We all know how the mainstream systems have had a multiplayer shooter that helps define a system, kind of like how Halo became one of the standout exclusive titles for the Xbox. But the question is, where's Nintendo's? Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Well, Brady, we have Splatoon. That's an online multiplayer shooter game from Nintendo. And though that's a true statement, and no one can deny that Splatoon is super fun, but what I'm referring to is a multiplayer shooter title aimed at a more mature audience. The Nintendo Wii offered such an experience with one of my favorite titles and one that I really wish would come back, and that title is The Conduit, which was released for the Nintendo Wii in 2009. Now, flashback time. Growing up, I would spend a lot of time watching my uncle and brother play Halo on the Xbox, and I remember thinking, man, I wish this game would be on the Nintendo. Well, that wish somewhat came true. I remember on my 12th birthday, my parents took me to a World War II museum located on a decommissioned aircraft carrier from that era. Afterwards, we went to the local Walmart for me to pick out a game, and there it was, The Conduit in all of its glory. Now, I have to admit, at the time, I had no idea what this game was. I've never heard of it, but it had cool cover art, so why not? I remember playing it for the first time and being amazed and thinking, oh yeah, we finally got Halo on the Wii. The story focuses on a former Secret Service agent named Michael Ford who finds himself in the middle of an invasion from an alien race known as the Drudge and an unknown virus affecting humans. The events of this game take place in a not-so-distant future in Washington, D.C. Michael Ford is recruited by a shadowy organization known as the Trust to retrieve an artifact known as the All-Seeing Eye and take down a terrorist called Prometheus. This game is every bit of badass as it sounds. You get a good variety of weapons, whether they be human or alien weapons. It had a story that one could easily get invested in, and an online multiplayer, which was surprisingly good for the Nintendo Wii. You could also customize your character that you used online, which was a nice touch. The Wii Remote usage in the game was surprisingly good in my opinion. It just worked and made sense to use. The Conduit had a sequel on the Nintendo Wii that was released in 2011. The Conduit 2 picks up right after the events of the first game. Now, for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I will not elaborate any further on this if you guys desire to go back and play these games, which I would highly recommend that you do. I personally think the Conduit games have the potential to be a hit on the Nintendo Switch 2, especially with the potentially large variety of options for controls, ranging from classic traditional controller use to the gyroscope and even utilization of the Joy-Cons as a mouse, similar to how Cyberpunk 2077 does it. I believe that if the Switch 2 hardware were to be utilized properly, the developers can deliver the player base a solid online mature shooter experience with the Conduit that we haven't really seen with Nintendo since the launch of the series in 2009. I'm pretty sure that if done with proper care and effort, this game series would not slip through the cracks of time once again. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my top 3 games that I would love to see return on this generation of Nintendo. What are your thoughts? Do you have any games that you would like to see come back? Maybe some that you grew up with, like how I grew up with these? If so, leave them down in the comment box down below. I would love to hear what you have to say. And as always, if you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, share, and if you don't like my takes, feel free to dislike as well. Totally fine with me. But regardless, have a great day, and I will see you guys in the next one.